Well, I think there's something beautiful as you get older and into your late 20s and 30s when I think number one, you understand your parents a lot better. I find that the older I get, the more I understand and appreciate my parents. I've always appreciated them, but I mean, when I think of it, I know that by the time my mom was my age, she'd already had all five of us, right? So I'm
Yeah.
not, I'm yet to become a dad, right? I'll be a father, in the future. But when I think of it, because when you're a little kid, I don't know, even someone being 30 years old, you think, 30 years old, like, you know everything, you've got everything together.
Yeah.
You think that, that's a grown adult. And then you kind of get there and you realize, oh, wow, actually, by 35, like, my mom had five kids, and then she went and moved to, we grew up in Saudi Arabia, right? So my parents just left to a complete foreign country. My dad went out there first, and my mom actually traveled with the five of us by herself. Even just thinking of that, like when I see parents in the airport and they've got even just like one or two kids, and I'm just thinking, my mom like went out with five of us, right? I'm a baby, and that, between a, I don't know, a 6 month old and a 10 or 11-year old, and you've got five kids there, and you're just traveling to a country you've never even been before. You're 30 something years old, and you're just kind of taking this leap of faith, and just so many of the lessons and things I didn't really understand as a kid. I'm finding the older I get, the more I can understand that. And I think there's also something really nice in the way that the dynamic shifts when you're able to do things for your parents, and you're even able to not just receive advice from them, but you're able to give them advice and you're able to help them out. Because when you're a kid, it's kind of all one way. It's all one way. And then you get a
Absolutely.
little bit older. And if you've got your life in order and you've got some interesting insights and experiences, then you actually find that just as much as you may go to your parents and ask them things or ask for advice, like, they'll also be like, hey, like, what do you think on this? I want to get your take. And I think there's something very cool about that.
You know what I think is really cool about what you just said is that, bro, your mother doing that is such a huge achievement,
Yeah.
you know? Like worthy of going on a podcast. I feel so bad for girls, particularly in our generation, man. Like your mom is gonna have grandchildren, or if she doesn't already.
Oh, she's got nine.
Yeah, dude. Think about that. Think about like Thanksgiving and everybody coming there and like that. Andrew was talking about this the other day. It's like he was talking about his grandmother, and there was like 70 people at Thanksgiving or some event they had for the family. And because of that one woman, your
Mm-hmm.
mom, even if none of you had children, man, there's five of you. And I'm sure, like, obviously, you're very successful, bro. Just you alone would be enough for her to be like super, super proud of what she did in her life. It's absolutely amazing, man, that we don't put mothers up on a higher pedestal. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Like,
Yeah.
clearly, I mean, I'm assuming she was a good mother.
Oh,
Um,
wonderful. Still is.
yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, she's a hero for that. So I think that's
Mm-hmm.
super, super cool, man. Super cool.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. And in that line of thinking, another thing that I've been considering recently, and I think this is perhaps an error or an oversight, I think a lot of young people make, particularly in modern Western society, is I think that most people, or a significant number of people, only think about the first half of their life, right?
I agree.
I think most people think of life up until about 40, maybe 45, right? I think most teenagers, people in their 20s, people, they think of the first half of life and they don't think, okay, actually between 45 and 95, what am I going to do? What's going to bring me joy? What are the things that I should maybe consider doing prior to that time in order to make sure that, because people are so career focused and material
Yeah.
focused, and it's so inward that I think a lot of people don't genuinely consider, okay, I want to do all this. And then actually, when I'm like 50 plus, when I'm in my 50s, my 60s, my 70s, my 80s, my 90s, what is it that's going to bring me joy? And being someone who's from a large family, my immediate family is seven, but then wider than that, my dad's one of 11, my mom is one of six or seven. I've got 50 something first cousins. Lord knows how many second. Like
Wow.
yeah. So that what
That's
that
lit
that
though, bro.
yeah. So I mean, what you were talking about before, even regarding my mom, I think, like, if I think of my grandmas, like, they have that whole
Yeah.
tree. They've got that whole tree of people. underneath them. And both all my grandparents have passed away now, and my parents are now in their 60s and 70s. But when I look at their life and I see what brings them joy in that latter half of their life, it's all children, family, grandchildren, that whole dynamic. I'm just like, wow, okay, this is why stuff is so important, because sometimes I'm hearing people talk about various things when they're in their 20s and their 30s. And again, they're just thinking up until that short time. They're not thinking, okay,
Yeah.
well, we live in this age where people are, what's the point of having kids, right? Oh, what's the point of that? What's the point of that? It costs money. It's this, and I can totally get where that perspective comes from. And maybe I've even had little glimpses at times where I've kind of felt that perspective, and then I realize, oh, actually, what about what about that second half of life?
Yeah. I completely agree with you, man. I think a lot of times people think short-sightedly,
Mm,
even down to the simplest things like getting just outrageous amounts of tattoos, or I just don't think that they're seeing into the future very much. One thing that's really important for me as I like build my business is that I make sure that I put a good portion of that money into something that makes sure that I never have to work again,
hmm
and that any children of mine to some degree are able to see how to, build some wealth. I don't know that I've completely made my mind up on how I would distribute it or whether
hmm
I would just teach them and hopefully, I think I want to teach them and educate them on how to do things. And if they want to jump on it and start doing it, I'll help them to the best, but I want them to have choice in their life. And at some point, I think you're 100% right. Like, what else could you do in your life other than give back to people that you care for and you love?